welcome to our construction clinic. This is part of a series which we've been holding regularly since March. Today, I think, marks the 18th in the series, so we're delighted to still be pulling in a respectable audience. Lots of new names on the list today as well, so welcome if you've not joined us before. As usual, just like to point out today's all about questions. You'll see a chat box on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. So if you do have questions, please feel free to send them across to us. And before I hand over today's panelists, I'm just going to take you through a brief introduction to the ICCP and what we're all about. Okay, so the ICCP is a professional members organisation, and we recognise those with skills, qualifications and expertise in the professional management of claims. We have three main objectives, and those are to establish international professional standards for the management of claims, to give recognition to those who have gained the appropriate knowledge and experience in the management of claims, and also to help and educate those who would like to gain this experience. So for the people new today, I'd just like to briefly introduce the steering committee and get you to know the faces behind the Institute. There's Andy Hewitt, our Executive Officer, Paul Gibbons, the ICCP President, Bill Bordill, one of our Fellows and a quantum specialist, Lee Spall, who specialises in planning and delays, also one of our Fellows, Mark Watson, who specialises in FIDIC claims and delay, and myself, Nina, the General Manager responsible for overall operations of the Institute and making sure we get things done, basically. If you'd like to learn more about the specifics of the profiles of the committee, you'll find their full profiles and why they wanted to be part of the ICCP and the committee under the About section on our website. Okay, so membership briefly. We offer 3 levels of membership: associate, member and fellow. I'm not going to go into all the details, but there are prerequisites, like any institute, to join at the desired level. We assess your application based on your qualifications, skills and expertise. All of the details you'll find under the membership section on the website. So if you'd like to take a look, please do check it out. You'll find all the details there, all of the fees. A note on fees: we do offer concessionary rates for people residing in certain countries. So you would receive a 50% concession, depending on where you reside in the world. So hopefully that might make it more appealing to some of you. Okay, so briefly, our marketing team has been very busy lately, and we have a benefits video. So rather than me explaining them to you, I'd just like to play this for you now. Okay, I hope you found that interesting. and some of those benefits piqued your interest. So if you would like to learn more about the ICCP, our website link is on screen there. You can contact me anytime. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you and answer any questions you have. Yeah, so that's the ICCP in a nutshell. And on to today's panelists. So Andy and Mark need no introduction by now. They've hosted many of these clinics together. But just very briefly, Andy is a FIDIC contracts and claims expert. He's author of 3 industry books. His newest book, FIDIC 99 Notices, is released in the past month. So if you'd like to check that out and that's part of your job requirements, I definitely recommend you take a look. And also his more known books, Construction Claims and Responses and the FIDIC Contracts, Obligations of the Parties. We're then joined by Mark Watson. Mark's a self-employed construction claims practitioner, delay analyst, expert witness and mediator. And Mark's actually going to kick off for us today. So I'd now like to hand over to Mark. All right, Andy, over to you for your questions.
Yeah, apologies, everyone. We sometimes do get this issue with connectivity problems through the internet, and we do seem to have challenges from South Africa. So sorry, Mark, but we will get back to you and the people that are interested and give a written response to these. So let me move on to my set of questions. And the first one I'm not going to answer because, to be honest, both Mark and I looked at the question and neither of us actually understood it. I'm not going to embarrass anybody by naming names, but it sort of brings me onto a subject that causes problems quite frequently in the world of contractual matters and in fact claims, is that if we are making a claim, we have to explain what our claim is all about. We have to explain the circumstances of the claim, the cause, the effect that the event had on the project. We have to explain how a delay analysis has been undertaken if it's an extension of time claim. We have to explain how costs have been calculated, and we have to explain what entitlement we have to make that claim. And all that is just that the essential elements to bringing about a successful claim. If we're on the other side of the fence and we're responding to claims, unless we're actually, well, even if we are accepting the claim, we've got to convince the employer that we're accepting it because of the right reasons. If we're rejecting it or reducing the amount that we're going to make in award from the claimed amount, we've got to explain to the contractor why we've made this decision, why these are our findings as the engineer. And the point I'm trying to come to here is that all this requires a very high level of communication. If we don't explain ourselves well in our claim or our response, we're going to get nowhere. If the claim's not properly explained, the engineer has got every right to reject it because we have to convince the engineer that the claim is just and an award must be made. The same goes to the engineer's responses. So, you know, my message that I want to put to everyone, whether you're dealing with drafting of contracts, writing contractual letters, writing site meeting minutes, writing anything, communicating anything, your communications must be clear. And if we get a situation where someone is asking a question and people like myself and Mark don't understand the question, I'm afraid that is just an example of how poor communication can go against us when we're trying to administer our contracts, and specifically when we're trying to present a claim or respond to a claim. So communication is key. And we do understand in the ICCP, many of our members from all over the world, and English is not their first language. So, you know, we have sympathy with that. And it doesn't really matter if your English is grammatically correct or you've got typos in it. But the thing is communication. You need to be understood. And I would suggest if you are involved in claims or contractual matters, as a contractor or an engineer, you need to ensure that someone on your team has got those communication skills, that can communicate, that can get the message across, put a justifiable claim together or a justifiable response. So that's my little, my few words of advice. Communications, clear communications both ways. Now, on to a question that I can answer, although it's less of a question and more of an essay, and it's been submitted by Graham Hooley. Graham, I hope you're keeping well, my friend. Graham's had a few challenges recently, so I hope everything's going well. And his colleague Karina Emeralda, who I believe are working on a project in Indonesia, and it's a FIDIC project. And their questions are interpreting, and I'm not going to read it out because I say it's more like an essay, interpreting FIDIC, what it says about the situation we all find ourselves in with COVID-19. Now, Graham, I know you're an ICCP member and possibly even a fellow. Just to remind everybody who are members, we've actually published an in-depth, it's a 9-page paper on FIDIC and COVID, and a second paper which deals with what will happen if COVID causes long periods of suspension, whether the employer, what are his options if he decides he doesn't want to go ahead with the project. So there are 2 papers available for members in the Knowledge Centre, so have a look at that. And I'm actually going to try to summarise the first paper, which deals with entitlement to contractors to claim for time and or money under the FIDIC contracts. So forgive me while I refer to my notes. First of all, COVID and an extension of time. Clause 8.4 under FIDIC, which is the extension of time for completion for those of you who are not familiar with FIDIC, provides that an extension of time is warranted in the case of, and I'm quoting here, unforeseeable shortages in the availability of personnel or goods caused by an epidemic or governmental action. So that there's a very, very clear entitlement to an extension of time to the extent that COVID delayed your project in the case of COVID. And I'm sorry, Karina mentioned the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic. Well, FIDIC says epidemic. A pandemic is a global epidemic, so I would say that it's reasonable to assume that whatever applies to an epidemic also applies to a pandemic. And the point is, if COVID's delayed your project, you're entitled to an extension of time, and that is fairly clear cut. If you get your extension of time, no delay damages, penalties, liquidated damages. But then we go on to the question on everybody's lips is, well, okay, we get time, but we don't get money. Or if you're on the other side of the fence, we have to award time, but do we have to award money? So everybody's, the buzzword on everybody's lips is COVID-19, force majeure, force majeure, force majeure. And let's just have a look at what subclause 19.1 definition of force majeure says in FIDIC. And it says the clause force majeure means an exceptional event or circumstance, and then we've got to tick 4 different boxes. A, which is beyond the party's control, COVID-19 complies there, which such party could not reasonably have provided against before entering into the contract, tick that box, which having arisen, such party could not reasonably have avoided, overcome, tick that box, which is not substantially attributable to the other party. So under this definition so far, COVID qualifies as a force majeure event. Now, clause 19.1 then qualifies and says force majeure may include, but is not limited to, so that's a little bit grey to start with, exceptional events or circumstances of the kind listed below, so long as the previous conditions are satisfied. And then it's quite a long list, which I'm not going to read out, but includes things such as war and hostilities, rebellion, terrorism, revolution, riot, commotion, disorder, munitions of war, explosives, radiation, and natural catastrophes such as earthquakes, hurricanes, typhoons, or volcanic activity. Now, we've got to look at COVID-19, and it's not of the kind listed. But FIDIC says of the kind listed, but is not limited to. So we've immediately got some doubt on what FIDIC means here. So if we then go to the FIDIC contract guide, which is a separate document that explains a little bit more about the intentions and meaning of FIDIC, it's a worthwhile document if you don't have a copy. So for some additional guidance. And the contracts guide says, and I'm going to quote here, after defining force majeure by reference to subparagraphs A to D, that's the four things that I read out, subclause 19.1 concludes with illustrative example, that's a war, terrorism, etc. And the guidance goes on to say, note that they are only illustrative examples, some of which might occur and not be force majeure. Other events which are not listed, may nevertheless constitute force majeure. Now, what does that mean? Well, I think on the balance of probabilities, this is allowing us to interpret force majeure, COVID-19 as a force majeure event. But as you can see from this, it's not clear cut. It's not definitely black and white. But I think reasonably we can consider COVID-19 as a force majeure event. So, having established, and I'm not saying that we have, I'm saying we can reasonably establish that COVID-19 is a force majeure event, we need to then see what are the contractor's rights and remedies if he's been affected by force majeure. And I need to turn up my notes again. We now need to go to clause 19.4, which are the consequences of force majeure. And this talks about if the contractor is prevented from performing his obligations, and goes on to say, if the event or circumstances is of the kind described in subparagraphs 1 to 4, that is the list of war, terrorism, natural catastrophes, etc. And in the case of subparagraphs 2 to 4, occurs in the country, the contractor is entitled to payment of costs. So it's only a couple of things out of that list. And they are rebellion, terrorism, revolution, riot, commotion, disorder, munitions of war, explosive materials. So, where am I? Sorry, I'm losing my place in my notes. It's a 9-page document, this. So what I'm saying here is that firstly, the events or circumstances must be of the kind described in subparagraph 1 to 4, which are the war, hostilities, rebellion, riot, munitions of war, etc. So that excludes natural catastrophes. But it's also saying it's not of the kind described. So apparently, this definition doesn't qualify. So let's have a look a little bit further down. And okay, that was actually it. But basically, to try and summarize, is that COVID-19 can be regarded as force majeure in terms of time. In terms of the ability to claim cost, I don't think it is. And if it is, some of the events are only applicable to the country in which the project is located. So, for example, if as a contractor you're affected by your supply chain which is coming from China, that's not in the country, you can't claim your costs. If, however, the delays as a result of COVID are actually having an effect or taking place in the country where the project is, you may be able to claim your costs. I realise that I've not probably made the best conclusion on this, so what I would recommend is that you read the whole 9 pages of the paper and get the real gem from that. But I hope that this quick overview has given you a feeling. Basically, extension of time, pretty clear cut under FIDIC, payment of costs, not so much. And I think certainly that one of the points I made in the paper was that there's enough doubt when it comes to the contractor's ability to claim for costs possibly for the contractor to make an argument in a claim. But there's also enough doubt in FIDIC for the engineer to reject on that basis. I would not like to be an adjudicator that a case of costs related to COVID-19 is put in front of me under a FIDIC contract, because I honestly don't see it as being a clear-cut matter. And maybe I can predict that in the future there's going to be lots of lawyers and arbitrators and judges and courts earning lots and lots of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars trying to settle this matter. My advice is, as a contractor, as an employer, work together to try and help each other out and try to agree something. I mean, as a contractor, we can say it's not clear cut, but we have suffered. Yeah. So please help us out, Mr. Employer. Good luck with that with some employers, but you may find some employers that are sympathetic and they are willing to help you out if you're doing your best as a contractor to overcome the delays. So that's really it from me, and I think that sort of nicely rounds up our 30 minutes. But if we have any other questions, funnel through Nina, Mark and I will do our best to answer them.
We did have a question from Akira through the chat box at the beginning, and given the technical glitch at the start, I think it's only fair that we cover it. So, question from Akira: is it correct that giving notice requirement has priority to the prevention principle?
I don't think the two, forgive me, this is straight off the top of my head. I've not had foresight of this question, but I think these are two entirely different subjects. Most contracts require the contractor to give notice. Some forms of contract make that a condition precedent to entitlement. If you don't give your notice, you can't have anything. So that's one thing. The prevention principle, however, is a legal principle which it obliges both parties to do whatever they can to help the other party perform their obligations. So, you know, one of the ways that a contractor can claim is that if the employer or the engineer, contractor, administrator, architect is obstructing them and not acting proactively, that would be under law a reason for the contractor to be able to claim damages. Akira, I don't see the relationship between the two. Maybe I've not thought about it enough, but to me, notices, get them submitted, contractors, respect the time frames, make sure they include the right information. Prevention principle, a useful legal thing to bolster up your claims.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Right, we'll call it quits there for today. Contact details and website link on screen again for everybody in case you'd like to get in touch with us. For the members on the session today, just a reminder that we've got another webinar coming your way this afternoon. That will be delivered by Lyndon White, one of our fellows, and he's going to be talking all about performance securities. So if you've not registered for that, there'll be a reminder in your inbox which was sent this morning. So if you've got time and you'd like to join us, that's at 1 o'clock UK time today. Thank you to everybody for joining today, and thank you to Andy and Mark, and sorry again for the connectivity issues that we had with Mark, but we'll try to get written responses for you so you don't miss out. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you back here in a couple of weeks for another clinic. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.